My husband left me homeless with our newborn in winter. When I begged my family for help, they said, should have thought of that before getting pregnant. Hi friends. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and share where you're watching from in the comments. Now let's go back to the story. The eviction notice crinkled in my frozen fingers as Derek's BMW disappeared into the December snow, leaving me and 3-week-old Emma shivering on the sidewalk. Our belongings, what little he'd allowed me to keep, sat in garbage bags beside us. The apartment keys felt like ice in my palm. Ma'am, you need to vacate the premises, the sheriff repeated, his breath forming clouds in the bitter air. I clutched Emma closer to my chest, her tiny face red from the cold despite being wrapped in every blanket I owned. 3 weeks ago I was Sarah Mitchell, devoted wife and new mother. Now I was nobody, standing in 6 inches of snow with a newborn and nowhere to go. Derek had planned this perfectly. The lease was in his name only. Our joint bank account, emptied before he filed for divorce. Credit cards, cancelled. Even the car was his, purchased before our marriage. He'd left me with exactly nothing except a baby and the clothes on our backs. Where are we supposed to go? I whispered to Emma, her small fingers grasping at my coat. The sheriff's expression softened. You got family? Someone who can help? I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers. I did have family. Parents who'd raised me with love, a sister who'd been my maid of honor, a brother who'd walked me down the aisle when Dad's arthritis flared. Surely they'd help. They had to help. The phone rang once, twice. Mom. My voice cracked. I need help. Sarah? What's wrong? Mom's voice carried that familiar mixture of concern and impatience I'd grown up with. Derek left me. He filed for divorce and had me evicted. I'm standing outside with Emma in the snow. I have nowhere to go. Silence stretched across the line. I could hear the television in the background. Dad watching his evening news, the same routine they'd maintained for 30 years. Oh, honey, Mom's voice had shifted, becoming careful, measured. This is a lot to process. You know Dad's still recovering from his surgery and we just don't have the space. Mom, I'm not asking to move in permanently. Just until I can figure something out. Emma's 3 weeks old. It's 12 degrees outside. Sarah, you need to understand our position. We're on a fixed income. We can't afford to support 2 extra people. And honestly, she paused and I heard her whispering something to Dad. Well, we did warn you about Derek. We told you he seemed controlling, but you wouldn't listen. My chest tightened. Are you seriously lecturing me right now? While your daughter and granddaughter are homeless. Don't take that tone with me, young lady. You're 32 years old. You made adult choices and now you need to handle the adult consequences. Maybe this is exactly the wake-up call you needed. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, snow collecting on the screen. Emma had started crying, her wails echoing off the empty street. My hands shook as I dialed my sister's number. This couldn't be happening. Not my family. Not the people who'd raised me to believe family always came first. Lindsay, thank God you answered. The words tumbled out between Emma's cries. I need your help. Derek left me and I'm homeless with Emma. Can we please stay with you tonight? Wait, what? Sarah, slow down. Derek left you. I explained everything quickly. The divorce papers, the eviction, Derek's calculated financial abuse. Lindsay listened without interrupting and for a moment hope bloomed in my chest. Sarah. That's horrible. She paused. But I just don't see how we can help right now. Kevin's already stressed about his job situation and with the kids' schedules. We barely have enough room as it is. Lindsay, I'm not asking to move in permanently. Just one night. Emma needs warmth and food. I know. But you have to understand, Kevin's really weird about having people in his space. And honestly, Sarah, this whole situation, it's kind of your fault, isn't it? The words hit like a physical blow. My fault. I mean, we all knew Derek was bad news. The way he isolated you from everyone, controlled your every move. We tried to tell you, but you kept defending him. You chose him over us repeatedly. And now you expect us to drop everything and fix the mess you created. Snow was soaking through my shoes and Emma's crying had intensified. Lindsay, please. I'm begging you. Your niece is 3 weeks old and it's freezing. Look, maybe this is what you need. Maybe hitting rock bottom will finally teach you some independence. You've been making terrible decisions for years, Sarah. Someone needs to say it. Are you listening to yourself? You're my sister. And you're a grown woman who should have thought about this before getting pregnant with a man who clearly didn't want to be a father. Don't you dare try to guilt me into enabling your poor choices. The line went dead. Emma's cries had turned desperate, hungry. I tried my brother next. Michael's phone went straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. Finally he picked up, annoyed. Sarah, what the hell? I'm at dinner with clients. This better be an emergency. It is an emergency. Derek divorced me and had me evicted. Emma and I are homeless in a snowstorm. I need help. Jesus Christ, Sarah. You sure know how to pick them, don't you? I explained the situation again, my voice getting hoarser with each repetition. Michael listened with the impatient silence I remembered from childhood, the way he'd listened to Dad's lectures while mentally calculating his escape. Look, I'm sorry this happened, but I can't help you right now. Melissa and I just bought the new house and we're stretched thin financially. Plus, she's already dealing with morning sickness with her pregnancy, and having a crying baby around would just make everything worse. Michael, it's one night. Emma's your niece. I get that, but you need to be realistic here. This isn't our problem to solve, Sarah. You married Derek against everyone's advice. We all told you he was controlling and manipulative, but you wouldn't listen. You cut us off for him, remember? 2 Thanksgivings in a row you chose his family over ours. The accusation stung because it held a grain of truth. Derek had been masterful at creating conflicts around family gatherings, making me choose between keeping peace with him and spending time with my relatives. That doesn't mean you abandon me when I need help most. Nobody's abandoning you. We're just not enabling your poor decision-making anymore. Maybe if you'd listened to us about Derek instead of being so stubborn, you wouldn't be in this mess. His voice softened slightly. Look, call social services or something. They have programs for situations like this. But Melissa and I can't get involved. It's not fair to ask us to fix problems you created. After Michael hung up, I sat in my car, Derek's old Honda that he'd generously left for me, probably because it barely ran, and stared at my phone. 3 calls. 3 rejections. 3 family members who'd rather lecture me than help their granddaughter and niece survive the night. Emma had finally stopped crying, exhausted. Her tiny face was pale and her breathing seemed shallow. Panic crept up my throat. I needed to get her somewhere warm fast. I scrolled through my contacts, landing on my Aunt Carol, Mom's sister. We weren't close, but maybe. I pressed record on my voice memo app before dialing. Something told me I'd need evidence of these conversations later. Carol, it's Sarah. I'm so sorry to bother you this late. Sarah. Honey, what's wrong? You sound terrible. I explained everything again, my voice steady despite the tears freezing on my cheeks. Carol listened patiently, making sympathetic sounds. Oh, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. Derek always seemed like such a charming man, but you never really know people, do you? Hope flick-led. Carol, I wouldn't ask if I had anywhere else to go. Emma needs warmth and food. Just for tonight until I can figure something out. Oh, honey. I wish I could help. I really do. But Tom and I are leaving for Florida tomorrow morning. Our winter vacation. The house will be empty for 3 months. Could we stay and watch the house for you? I'm very responsible and it would help both of us. Pause. When Carol spoke again, her voice had cooled considerably. Sarah, I don't think that's appropriate. I mean, you're going through a divorce. There could be legal complications. What if Derek tried to claim squatters' rights or something? And honestly, having someone with a new baby in the house. Babies are so unpredictable. What if something got damaged? Carol, I'm family. I know, dear. And I feel terrible about this whole situation. But you have to understand, actions have consequences. You chose to marry Derek despite everyone's concerns. You chose to have a baby with him. These were adult decisions and now you need to handle the adult consequences. Maybe this is God's way of teaching you some hard lessons about independence and self-reliance. Another hang-up. Another recording saved. I was starting to see the pattern. I kept calling, working through every family member I could think of. My cousin Jennifer, who I'd helped through her own divorce 2 years earlier. My uncle Paul, who'd borrowed money from me when his business was struggling. Cousin Mark, who'd stayed with us for a month when he'd lost his job. Every conversation followed the same script. Initial sympathy followed by excuses followed by lectures about personal responsibility. And every conversation was quietly recorded on my phone. Jennifer was particularly brutal. Sarah, I hate to say this, but we all saw this coming. Derek was obviously using you, but you were so blinded by whatever hold he had over you that you couldn't see it. We tried to warn you, but you chose him over family every time. Remember when you missed Grandma's 80th birthday because Derek had planned that ski trip? Or when you skipped Dad's retirement party because Derek said he needed you to host his work colleagues? Those were compromises, Jennifer. That's what marriage is. No, Sarah. That was manipulation. And now you're asking us to clean up the mess you made by ignoring our advice for 3 years. At some point, you have to take responsibility for your choices. She'd been right about Derek's manipulation but wrong about everything else. I'd tried to balance my marriage with family relationships, but Derek had been subtly sabotaging every attempt. Family gatherings became sources of conflict. He'd pick fights before events or create emergencies that required my immediate attention. Gradually, it became easier to just avoid the drama. But now, sitting in a freezing car with my newborn daughter, I realized none of that mattered to my family. They'd decided I'd chosen Derek over them, and now they were choosing their resentment over Emma's basic survival. Uncle Paul's rejection was particularly painful. Sarah, you know I love you, but this isn't our problem to solve. You made your bed and now you need to lie in it. Maybe this experience will teach you to make better choices in the future. By midnight, I'd called everyone. The answer was always the same. The women's shelter downtown was full. The second shelter I tried didn't take infants. The third had a 2-week waiting list. By 2 a.m., I was driving around the city, running the heater in the car to keep Emma warm, burning through the little gas I had left. At a 24-hour McDonald's, I changed Emma's diaper in the bathroom and tried to feed her. She was lethargic, her skin cold to the touch. Fear clawed at my chest. I needed help and I needed it now. I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? I have a 3-week-old baby and we're homeless in this weather. I'm scared she's getting hypothermic. I need to know where I can take her to get warm. The operator was kind, giving me addresses for emergency overnight warming centers. But when I arrived at the first location, the volunteer shook her head sympathetically. We can take you, but we don't have facilities for infants. No cribs, no baby supplies. And honestly, with this many people in close quarters, it's not sanitary for a newborn. The second warming center said the same thing. The third was closed due to a burst pipe. As dawn broke, I found myself in the parking lot of the hospital where Emma had been born just 3 weeks earlier. I'd been so happy that day, so full of hope for our little family. Now I was contemplating surrendering my daughter to child services because I couldn't provide basic shelter. But then I remembered something Derek had said during one of his rants about my useless family. Something about my grandmother's will that I'd never thought much about. Grandma Rose had died when I was in college, leaving behind her small house and a few investments. Mom had always handled the estate details, but Derek had mentioned seeing paperwork that seemed unusual. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. There was one person I hadn't called yet, Grandma Rose's old lawyer, Mr. Henderson. He was ancient, probably retired, but maybe. The phone rang 6 times before a creaky voice answered. Henderson speaking. Mr. Henderson, this is Sarah Mitchell. Sarah Coleman before I got married. Rose Coleman was my grandmother. Sarah. My goodness, how are you, dear? I haven't heard from your family in years. Mr. Henderson, I'm calling about Grandma Rose's estate. I'm in a difficult situation, and I need to understand exactly what she left behind. There was a pause. Well, dear, that's an interesting question. Your grandmother's will was quite specific, and frankly, I've been wondering for years why no one from the family has contacted me about the remaining provisions. My heart started pounding. Remaining provisions? Sarah, are you somewhere you can speak privately? This is important. I looked at Emma sleeping in her car seat. Sir, it's just me and my daughter. Your grandmother left her house and initial investments to be managed by your parents until you turned 30. But there were additional assets, stocks, bonds, a small property in Colorado, that were to be transferred directly to you on your 30th birthday. That was 2 years ago, dear. The world tilted. Additional assets? Quite substantial ones, actually. Your grandmother was far wealthier than anyone realized. She'd been quietly investing for decades. The current value of your inheritance is approximately $2.8 million. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking. Mr. Henderson, that can't be right. My parents never mentioned anything about additional money. They said Grandma left the house and about $50,000 in bonds. Oh, my dear girl. They've been receiving detailed quarterly statements about your account for 12 years. I send them directly to your mother as requested. The account has been growing steadily, waiting for you to claim it. Rage built in my chest like a slow fire. My parents knew. They'd known for 2 years that I had access to nearly $3 million, and they'd let me struggle in poverty with Derek. They'd watched him control every dollar, isolate me financially, and they'd said nothing. Mr. Henderson, what do I need to do to access these funds? Just come to my office with identification. The paperwork is straightforward. Sarah, may I ask why you're inquiring about this now? I told him everything. The divorce, the eviction, being homeless with Emma, my family's refusal to help despite having access to information about my inheritance. His voice turned icy. They told you to call social services while knowing you're a millionaire? Yes, sir. I'll have the paperwork ready within an hour. And Sarah? I think it's time we reviewed exactly what information your parents have received about your grandmother's estate over the years. By noon that day, I was sitting in a warm hotel room, Emma fed and sleeping peacefully. The bank transfer had gone through that morning, $2.8 million, plus accumulated interest. I wasn't just financially secure, I was wealthy. But money wasn't enough. Not after what my family had put us through. They'd let a 3-week-old baby suffer in freezing weather while sitting on knowledge of her mother's inheritance. They'd lectured me about responsibility while hiding information that would have prevented the entire crisis. I spent the afternoon listening to the recordings I'd made, my anger crystallizing with each cruel word, each sanctimonious lecture about adult consequences and poor choices. My family hadn't just abandoned me, they'd actively chosen to let me suffer while knowing they had the power to help. Mr. Henderson's office had provided more shocking details. My parents had been receiving quarterly statements showing the growth of my inheritance. They'd known the exact dollar amount down to the penny. Mom had even called his office 6 months ago to confirm the account was still growing appropriately for when I eventually matured enough to handle such responsibility. They'd been treating my inheritance like their own personal judgment call, deciding when and if I deserved access to my own grandmother's legacy. I called a private investigator that Mr. Henderson recommended. My family thought they could manipulate and gaslight me while controlling my financial freedom. They were about to learn exactly who they were dealing with. I need you to investigate my family's finances, I told the PI. Specifically, I need to know if they've received any benefits or made any claims related to an estate they've been managing for me without my knowledge. What kind of benefits? I'm not sure yet. But people don't usually hide nearly $3 million from someone unless they're getting something out of it. The PI, a sharp-eyed woman named Detective Martinez, smiled grimly. In my experience, when families hide money, they're usually spending it. Let me dig around for a few days. As I hung up, Emma stirred in her bassinet, opening her perfect blue eyes. Don't worry, baby girl, I whispered. Mommy's going to make sure this never happens to anyone else. 3 days later, Detective Martinez called with results that made my blood boil. Sarah, you need to sit down for this. I'm listening. Your parents have been using your inheritance as collateral for loans. They took out a second mortgage on their house 2 years ago, listing your $2.8 million as backup collateral. They've also been using the quarterly statements to establish credit lines and make investments in your mother's brother's restaurant business. My jaw clenched. They've been spending my money? Not directly, but they've been leveraging it. Your Uncle Paul's restaurant expansion? Funded with a loan that uses your inheritance as security. Your sister Lindsay's husband's new truck? Same thing. They've essentially been telling lenders, don't worry, we have access to nearly $3 million if these loans go bad. Is that legal? Technically, they have legal authority as estate managers until you formally claim the inheritance. But ethically, they've been using your money to benefit themselves and other family members while keeping you in poverty. Oh, and Sarah, there's more. My hands tightened on the phone. What else? Your mother called the estate lawyer's office last week. She wanted to know if there was any way to delay your access to the funds, citing concerns about your mental stability following your divorce. She was trying to have you declared temporarily incompetent to handle the inheritance. The hotel room went silent except for Emma's soft breathing. My mother had tried to have me declared incompetent while I was homeless with her granddaughter. She'd rather steal my inheritance than see me independent. Detective Martinez, I need you to document everything. Every loan, every investment, every conversation they've had about my money. I want a complete financial picture of how my family has benefited from hiding my inheritance. Already working on it. But Sarah, there's something else you should know. I did some digging into Derek's finances too. His divorce lawyer is expensive. Really expensive. The kind of attorney that costs $50,000 up front. Derek doesn't have that kind of money. Exactly. But guess whose uncle co-signed a loan for Derek's legal fees? My world tilted. No. Your Uncle Paul. Derek's divorce attorney was paid for with money leveraged against your inheritance. Your own family helped fund the legal battle that left you homeless. That evening, I sat in my hotel room, Emma sleeping peacefully beside me, and planned my next move. My family hadn't just abandoned me, they'd actively conspired to keep me powerless while profiting from my inheritance. They'd funded Derek's divorce, tried to have me declared incompetent, and let their granddaughter freeze rather than admit their deception. They'd lectured me about adult consequences, while ensuring I couldn't access the resources to handle them. They'd called me irresponsible while stealing my financial independence. Every cruel word, every sanctimonious lecture, every refusal to help had been built on a foundation of lies and theft. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I started making calls. Not to family this time, to professionals. A high-powered attorney who specialized in estate fraud. A media consultant who handled reputation management. A charity lawyer who could help me set up a foundation. And most importantly, a publicist who knew how to make stories go viral. Here's what I want, I told the publicist. I want every person who's ever been abandoned by their family during a crisis to hear my story. I want every parent who's ever used their child's resources for their own benefit to be exposed. And I want my family to understand exactly what it feels like to be publicly humiliated and abandoned. The publicist listened to the recordings, reviewed the financial evidence, and smiled. Sarah, this is the kind of story that changes laws. Family abandonment, financial abuse, estate fraud. This hits every nerve. When do you want to go public? I want to give them one last chance to do the right thing. One opportunity to apologize and make amends before I destroy their reputations. And if they don't? I looked at Emma, remembering her pale face in the freezing car, her weak cries echoing off empty streets. Then they'll learn that actions have consequences. Over the next week, I quietly established the Emma Rose Foundation, named for my daughter and grandmother, dedicated to helping families abandoned during crises. I set up emergency funds, legal aid programs, and temporary housing assistance. If my family wanted to lecture people about self-reliance, they'd do it from a position of public humiliation. I called a family meeting at Mom and Dad's house on a Sunday afternoon. I need to discuss something important with everyone, I told Mom. It's about Emma's future and I want the whole family there. They thought I was coming to apologize. To admit they'd been right about Derek, about my poor choices, about needing to learn from my consequences. They probably expected me to thank them for the tough love that had supposedly taught me valuable lessons. I arrived with Emma, Detective Martinez, my attorney, and a folder of evidence thick enough to choke a horse. The family was all there. Mom, Dad, Lindsay, Kevin, Michael, Melissa, Uncle Paul, Aunt Janet, and even Cousin Jennifer. They'd gathered like vultures ready to watch me grovel. Sarah, Mom said warmly, we're so glad you've come to your senses. We know it was hard, but sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they can learn to stand on their own feet. Actually, Mom, I'm here to discuss Grandma Rose's inheritance. Specifically, the $2.8 million you've been hiding from me for 2 years. The room went dead silent. Dad's face paled. Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I don't know what you're talking about, Mom stammered. Really? I pulled out the quarterly statements. These are copies of the financial reports you've been receiving about my inheritance. The same inheritance you used as collateral for Paul's restaurant loan, Lindsay's husband's truck, and Derek's divorce attorney. Uncle Paul stood up. Now wait just a minute. Sit down, Paul. You co-signed a loan for the attorney who left your grandniece homeless. You used my money to fund the legal battle that put Emma on the street in December. I turned to face the room. Everyone in this room abandoned a 3-week-old baby during a blizzard. You lectured me about responsibility while hiding nearly $3 million that belonged to me. You called me selfish and irresponsible while spending my inheritance on your own families. We were protecting that money. Mom started. You were stealing it. And when Derek left me with nothing, you let me suffer rather than admit what you'd done. You'd rather see Emma freeze than confess your lies. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady and cold. You're going to repay every dollar you've leveraged against my inheritance with interest. Paul, that includes Derek's legal fees. Lindsay, Kevin's truck loan gets transferred to your names entirely. Michael, Melissa, that house you just bought. Hope you can afford it without using my inheritance as backup collateral. The room erupted in protests, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. Tomorrow morning, the Emma Rose Foundation goes public with the full story of how a wealthy family let their granddaughter become homeless rather than admit they'd been hiding her mother's inheritance. The recordings of every conversation, every cruel lecture about personal responsibility, every refusal to help while you sat on millions of dollars. You can't do this to us, Dad said weakly. We're your family. Family doesn't let babies freeze in the snow while hoarding their money. Family doesn't fund their daughter's divorce to keep her powerless. Family doesn't try to have someone declared incompetent to steal their inheritance. Mom's face had gone white. Sarah, please. We were just trying to protect you. From what? Financial independence? The ability to leave an abusive marriage? You kept me trapped with Derek by hiding the resources I needed to escape. Every day I stayed with him, every manipulation I endured, every moment of isolation. That's on you. I stood up, Emma sleeping peacefully in my arms. The foundation launches tomorrow. The story goes viral by Tuesday. By Wednesday, every person in your social circles will know exactly who you are. Your church, your neighbors, your coworkers, everyone will understand that you let a newborn suffer to protect your lies. People will understand, Lindsay protested. They'll see we were trying to help you learn independence. I smiled coldly. Really? Let's test that theory. Let's see how many people think abandoning a 3-week-old baby teaches valuable life lessons. As I walked toward the door, Paul called out desperately. Sarah, we can work this out. We're family. Family forgives. I turned back one last time. Family also protects each other. You had your chance to be family when Emma and I were homeless. You chose lectures over love, theft over trust. Now you get to experience the adult consequences of your choices. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click. Outside, Detective Martinez smiled. How do you feel? I looked down at Emma, warm and safe in my arms, then back at the house where my biological family was probably panicking about their reputations. I feel like we're finally free. 5 years later, I stood in the boardroom of the Emma Rose Foundation, looking out at a wall covered with thank you letters from families we'd helped. The foundation had assisted over 10,000 people in crisis situations, providing emergency housing, legal aid, and financial support to those abandoned by their own families. Emma, now a bright 5-year-old, played quietly in the corner with blocks, building what she called houses for people who need them. She didn't remember that freezing December night, but she'd grown up understanding that home was about safety and love, not blood relations. My biological family had lost their house when the loans came due and their collateral disappeared. Uncle Paul's restaurant failed when the foundation's lawyers clawed back the fraudulent loans. Lindsay and Kevin divorced under the financial pressure. Michael and Melissa's marriage survived, but barely. Mom and Dad moved to a small apartment and avoided eye contact when they saw me around town. Some people called me vindictive. Others said I was justified. I didn't care about either opinion. What mattered was that families in crisis now had options, protection, and advocates. Emma looked up from her blocks. Mommy, did you have a family before me? I had people who shared my DNA, I said carefully. But you and I are each other's family now. Real family protects each other. She nodded solemnly and went back to building. On her latest structure, she'd made a sign that read, "No locks on love," a phrase she'd heard me use in interviews about the foundation's mission. That evening, as I tucked Emma into bed in our warm, secure home, she asked, Mommy, why do some people hurt their families? Because they forget that love means taking care of each other, especially when it's hard. But we'll never forget, right? Never, I promised, kissing her forehead. Our family is built on protection, not blood. On choice, not obligation. And on making sure no one else ever feels as cold and alone as we did that night. Through the window, snow began to fall, the first of the season. But inside our home, we were warm, safe, and surrounded by the chosen family we'd built from love, purpose, and the unshakable belief that everyone deserves protection when they're at their most vulnerable. The recording device on my nightstand caught Emma's sleepy whisper, "Mommy, I love our family. I love our family too, sweetheart. Sweet dreams." As her breathing evened out, I smiled and turned off the recorder. Some conversations were too precious for evidence. They were just for us.